Hey guys, what's up? So again, coming at you here from the beautiful seaside town of Tianjin, about half an hour away from Beijing. It's been roughly 15 years since I came to China, almost exactly. I moved to Shanghai in May 2007, so just about 15 years ago. And after that, I have lived in different cities like, of course, Shanghai, but also Qingdao and Beijing. And I travel a lot in different cities. Like right now, I'm in Tianjin for a couple of months. And also I spent time in Ningbo and other smaller third and fourth tier cities. So today I thought I'll talk about three big things that have changed over the time since I first came here, because people always ask me what changed. And normally they expect me to talk about like new buildings and architecture and maybe technology. And it's true, like those things have changed. But if you look a little bit deeper than that, you can see that in society and culture, you also had three very big themes of change. I would say the first one is about opening up and closing back down. China began to open up along with the economic reforms from Deng Xiaoping in the 80s. Initially it was quite a slow process, going from a very agrarian society to an industrialized economy. It took place mostly in the 90s, and then by the time I came here in 2007, China was already quite a wealthy, industrialized country, and it was still opening up. There was more connections gradually every year between China and overseas. There were like a lot of expats moving to China, and I was a part of that wave, like young, hopeful people like me. It was quite easy to live here and get a job here. A lot of things about American culture and Western culture were very popular, like American movies, for example. Everybody was like studying English. People were like really looking forward to travel overseas and to work overseas, maybe to move overseas. There was not this like negativity between China and the West. And it was mutual. Like back in the West, we were also quite positive about China at that point. We saw China as a big economic opportunity and not as a threat. So I would say my first 10 years were the golden period in my time in China. It was fun, it was easy, it was exciting. Then when Trump came in 2016, of course he changed the way that the US looks on China. Suddenly China became a threat that had to be dealt with, both economically but also militarily. And China reacted towards that threat by becoming way more defensive, protective, and isolationist. Because until then, everywhere they had been met with open arms. And suddenly that changed, and the world began to close down to China, like companies like Huawei, for example. So, and of course, together with the new president in China, Xi Jinping, who also had quite a nationalist and conservative outlook, that whole thing began changing in 2016. And in the following few years, China became more nationalist, more conservative. It became more difficult for expats to come to China and to get a work here. And gradually, they began to close down some bars, some clubs that were mainly for expats. And I was living in Shanghai at the time, in a kind of like the expat bubble. So I saw this change very close up front. And then of course you had COVID, which led to a complete lockdown of China, where basically it's nearly impossible to come here or to leave, even if you're Chinese. I'm just gonna have to change my arm here, it's a bit tiring to hold the phone. So even though some cities in China have been in lockdown occasionally due to COVID, the country now even though it's been over 2 years since COVID started, is still on a lockdown. So you have goods moving in and out, but people can't move in and out. So you have a situation right now where almost no Chinese people have been overseas for the past 2 years. And you also have this trend that started with Trump, where China is becoming more defensive and isolationist, which has continued, because even though there's a new US administration with Biden, they're still quite, let's say, negative towards China. So China has continued this kind of like anti-West, anti-US approach. They just banned all the English private education schools for kids. They have reasserted control over the schools to avoid any like Western influence or Western curriculum. Again, the number of expats have dropped dramatically since these restrictions started. So China has been closing down again. When I came here, it was basically the end of the opening up era, and then 2016 things started to close down. Now it's completely shut. And I think even if China will open up again after COVID, it will be in a very moderate way. Unless, of course, there's like a war over Taiwan pretty soon. The opening up will happen when COVID is declared a complete victory and they open up. But I think it will still be a very different China to the way it was before. It will still be more nationalistic, more conservative, and more close to the world. And if you think about it, that has always been the trend. Wait, I will go change like this so you see the street. China has always been a pretty closed society to foreigners. I mean, the only time China opened up in the past was during the Opium Wars, and that's because they had no choice, because like all these Western powers basically declared war on them to force China to open up. But China, the government, long before the current president, has always been very much opposed to having foreigners living and working everywhere in the country. They don't mind the foreign trade. In fact, they love it and they thrive on it. But they don't like the foreigners to actually be everywhere. And so I think China will go back to a more normal state again of nationalism and isolationism. The second big change is that people have way more disposable income now than they had 15 years ago. And when I came here, people were basically just spending most of the money on their accommodation, like on their apartments, on their mortgages. If anybody had money, they would just reinvest it to buy an apartment or stuff like that. People didn't really spend much on their hobbies or their lifestyles. So that has changed. Today, people, they have hobbies. It could be exercise, it could be photography, it could be that they play some kind of like, I don't know, whatever. Those are the two most common hobbies I've seen. And before COVID, one huge change was traveling. When I came here, it was very rare for Chinese people, like middle-class people, to go traveling. And before COVID, basically everybody I knew, like just regular office workers, would go to like Thailand for a week, or Malaysia, or the Philippines, or maybe Europe, or maybe US. They would go everywhere just for traveling, and they would post their photos on WeChat. So every like Chinese holiday, you would see like a bunch of photos of everybody going from to these amazing travel destinations. And if you were a tourist yourself and you went to those destinations, you would find that there were suddenly a lot of Chinese people everywhere. And you would see Chinese street signs, and people would accept Alipay and WeChat Pay pretty much all around Asia and even Paris and Europe. And of course that's now all gone first of all, they began to have enough money, and secondly, they began to spend it on their own personal pleasure, not just on money, apartments anymore, or saving it for the future. So that was a big change. Today, like if you're in a big rich town like Tianjin or Beijing, you see a lot of Teslas everywhere. Like where I'm living in Beijing, downtown, you know, like almost every shopping mall has a Tesla a demo shop, and almost like 1 out of 7 or 8 cars is a Tesla. Tesla here is not really a luxury anymore. It's just a pretty normal middle class car. And right now you don't see many Teslas here, like in this area where I'm at right now. Basically I'm in the outskirts of Tianjin, in the southern Nankai district, so it's not really like a rich area. There are not too many Starbucks here or international shops or so on. So this is maybe more like where most people in China are. Oh, there's a Tesla right there. I'm not sure if you see it. But still, people have way more money to spend. And that goes to the third big change, is that because China has had this huge economic development very quickly in the past 30 years, every generation has been very different from the previous one. Also because of the demographic changes that have happened here. So I come from the last big generation, the millennial generation, let's say the old millennials, around 40. Because when China started the one-China policy, it was around 82, I think, or 81. And after that, suddenly you had a very quickly declining birth rates. So it's basically our generation right now, millennials, who are having kids. And there are quite a few of us, but most of us still only have one kid. And of course, the generation after us, the Gen Zs, who have also started to build families, there are way less of them, first of all. And second of all, they also have way less kids. So just working in China, I see that the average age of my coworkers has increased very much. You know, like when I had my first job in Shanghai, I was at this marketing agency in 2007. Basically everybody around me were like in their mid-20s. Same age as me. Now, in my current office in Beijing, I think the average age is around 40, same as me. The youngest person is like in her early 30s. And there are 5 women in the office, the one around 30, and the other 4 all around 40. 3 of them are married, 2 of them have 1 kid, 1 of them has 2 kids, and the 4th one is still single and probably will not get married or have kids. So we see this like in society, that there are less young people around, and also we see that in the statistics that the demographics are basically collapsing very quickly. Young people today don't really want to have kids. And the reason for that is because they feel a lot of pressure. Having a kid in China, well, first of all, it's hard. The marriage rates are very low. And in China, having a kid without marriage is basically still illegal, largely, and also socially unacceptable by family and society. So it is hard for people here, first of all, to get married. One reason is that to get married as a man, you typically need to own an apartment. And an apartment in a place like Beijing, like a cheap one, would be like $1 million at the low end. And then you have to pay like 4.5% mortgage rate on that. And your salary might be something like, if you're lucky, maybe 1,500 US a month before tax. So it's basically an impossible equation for most people in a big city to earn enough money to buy an apartment. So that's why it's getting hard to get married. So you have very few eligible bachelors who can get married. And then when you get married, a lot of women, they don't really want to have kids because having kids is it's a lot of work, it's expensive, and you know, it takes up more space. You have to buy a bigger apartment if you have a lot of kids. So basically, urban people today in China don't want to have kids. So you see that this huge demographic change. But also what you see is that my generation of millennials in China, they grew up in a pretty poor country that became rich. They still had a very strong work mentality. Young people today, the Gen Zs, or even younger ones, have grown up in a rich country already. They're used to comfort in life. They want to enjoy life more. They want to spend time on their hobbies. They don't want to work non-stop. They want to have like a life outside of work as well. And this is the difference between them and the millennials. And basically, they feel that even if they try, they're not going to make it. They're not going to become rich enough to buy an apartment or to get married or to have kids. So basically, they just give up. And that's where you have the expression "tangping," like lie flat, from, because they would just rather lie flat than do nothing, rather than to work and to make money because it's too hard. So you see these huge changes between each generation, and you see less and less of every new generation simply because of the demographics. So I would say those are the three major changes I've seen here in the past 15 years. If there's something I forgot, something I missed, feel free to let me know. So that's all for today, guys. Thank you and take care.